Welcome back to my art channel, where today I'm going back to basics with some very simple sketchbook ideas for busy days. Just practice the smallest components you can find. If you're a landscape artist, you might want to take 10 minutes to look at specific tree roots or study just one type of cloud. For the detail breakdown here, I started with a class by Marco Bucci's. I always struggle with noses the most, so to have someone else break them down for me, explaining each plane and how it relates to the rest of the face, was incredibly helpful. I'd been running errands and shipping orders that day, and to avoid going back home to my desk, where it would be cold thanks to a snowstorm, we took refuge in a warm, cozy cafe instead. I took out my sketchbook and just dove into the subject I always struggle with the most. When studying like this, the actual sketches can be beyond simplistic, diagrams even. You can see that I took written notes. I've mentioned this in some of my sketchbook tours and my art advice video. Writing down notes, treating art like any other subject you want to learn, can be incredibly helpful, especially when I then flip back through my old sketchbooks and notes to rediscover what I'd learned and forgotten. You can use short tutorials, an art book you want to learn from, or visit a museum and find a detail to hyperfocus on for half an hour or so. After drawing some of those noses here, it soon got a bit too dark with the moody cafe lighting for proper note-taking. But I went back over these a few days later, sketching some master studies but keeping what I'd learned during that short practice session in mind, and rereading my notes, kind of reminding myself of all the different planes while drawing these examples. If you've now opened your own sketchbook but feel a bit overwhelmed and don't know where to start, join me as I find ideas and inspiration on Skillshare, who have kindly sponsored this video. Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives with thousands of classes, and I've been exploring a variety of them to jumpstart my sketchbook sessions this year. You already know that I love to constantly learn more about art and drawing, and Skillshare has learning paths that can guide me through an entire subject I'm excited about. For example, there's this learning path for the foundations of figure drawing, and I've also found some of my favorite artists like Chris Hong and Marco Bucci's classes, perfect for my portrait practice. While I'm of course immediately drawn to the art and illustration classes, Skillshare goes beyond that with categories like film and video I want to dive in to improve my editing for these videos, and animation and 3D to learn more about modeling art references. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today, and thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video. I'll definitely go over more of these individual components of a face in the future, as it really only takes a short amount of time, but hopefully adds up as I continue. The second way I've been practicing lately: correcting my sketches. Now, correcting is a bit of a loaded word for this. I don't really assign value to my individual sketches and studies. I don't consider them a failed or a successful sketch, just different learning experience or fun experiments. But lately I found that it's really interesting to look at sketches again a few days after I've drawn them and see what I notice after that passage of time. I sketched these 2 figure studies while watching a cooking show with my partner one night and then forgot about them for a bit. But I still had the reference pictures, so when I looked at them again during that cafe visit, I could see them with fresh eyes and compare them more objectively. That's where this simple exercise comes in. Pick a colored pencil or something else that's visibly different from the medium you sketched with, and then draw on top of your previous sketch. I started by looking at negative space, here with this green color and later on the second sketch with a red tone, on focusing my eyes just a bit for a more detached view. What do I mean by negative space and why is it helpful? Negative space is what surrounds the figure, the portrait, the tree, the building. And since we all have some preconceived notions of what a face or figure or tree should look like, focusing on the negative space instead can help us see what is actually there instead of what we expect to see. It works especially well when the negative space is surrounded by our drawing, like the arm, shoulder and face here. I went over the entire pencil sketch like that, beyond just negative spaces, looking for angles and shadow shapes that don't quite add up with the reference. It's not even about making this a more realistic copy of that reference, but for discovering patterns in my drawing style and perception. This is a great way to warm up before drawing something else, maybe something more challenging, as it feels like I'm forcefully activating my perception. The connection between what my eyes see, what I think I should be seeing, and what my hand ends up putting on the page. It's so much easier to have a drawing to re-explore, to evolve and reiterate on top of, instead of starting from scratch each time. My third, simple and a bit mindless way to practice drawing. Using moving references. While I wish this were referring to a live model, I actually mean GIFs. Drawing from photo reference is great for detailed studies or elaborate paintings, but for just quick sketches or to warm up, I've been using moving elements for a long time. It can be movie scenes, but I've also taken short video clips with my phone of my cat walking, or a textile fluttering, or how a tree branch sways on a windy day. The movement can be subtle, or a more extreme shift, depending on the type of challenge you want, but overall I found that sketching from a moving reference gets rid of some of my perfectionism and lets me see my subject with new eyes. Here, as I was already warmed up after sketching nose diagrams and correcting my figure drawing, I sketched a quick portrait inspired by Crimson Peak. I picked a very subtly moving scene, just a second or so of a slight head turn. These drawings are always very hit or miss. I love how this quick sketch of Edith turned out, but when I gave the same technique a try again a few days later, without being warmed up, the portrait turned out very stiff and over-rendered, and I couldn't capture the likeness well here. On the other hand, this is a great warm-up exercise as well, as I then went back to a client piece I had to be working on that day and found the drawing process went very smoothly. When sketching like this, I either go very simplistic, more of a simplified comic character to capture an expression, or I try to be very soft and fluid. I barely lift the pencil from the page, just wandering from line to line, drawing in curves instead of sharp, constructed angles. This is probably as different from the Luminance method as I get, as I usually do try and measure out my portraits a bit, while for these I go more just with feeling. If you have a live model, be it a friend, a partner, a pet, or the great outdoors, all the better. But for a quick, fun sketching exercise, I enjoy having a bunch of these reference GIFs ready to go, to doodle whenever I feel I need to loosen up or to take a break from some more detail-oriented drawings. These always go really quick, and it's nice to know that even 10 or 20 minutes can be enough for some relaxing sketches or a little practice session. We don't always have hours upon hours to dedicate to our drawing practice after all, so it's nice to know that every little bit can make a difference or just make us feel good. Here I first drew a portrait from a movie scene, as I did before, and then added a close-up of her eye to take a closer look at how the shadows move in that area. I think it might be a great exercise to draw a whole sequence of these next to each other as the head slowly turns to a different angle and the lighting and expression changes. I'm back to using the Derwent drawing colored pencils again. These are old favorites of mine ever since I had a small set of them, and I keep repurchasing the terracotta shade, as it's available open stock at Korean art shops. And it's the shade I use the most for portraits. It's a warm brown leaning toward orange, just lively enough for a portrait to look vibrant without being overwhelming. I also used Venetian red for that drawing of Edith earlier, which is less red than the name implies. It's an earthy, dark shade, originally a natural pigment used in Renaissance paintings, and in the case of this Derwent drawing pencil, pretty desaturated. I love both of these in combination, and the Derwent drawing colored pencils in general just suit these kind of looser, softer sketches. They are wax-based and their core diameter is 5mm, pretty chunky and automatically less precise and instead focused on expressive textures. For comparison, some of my other wax-based colored pencils like the Caran Luminance and the Prismacolor Premier both have cores measuring around 3.8mm, and it really does make a difference. I prefer those for adding detail and even ended up using the Prismacolor Terracotta, a pretty close color match, on the portrait to add a bit of sharpness at the end. But if, like me, you'd like to loosen up your sketches, finding softer line work and shading, I really recommend the Derwent drawing, as even just a single shade on its own is enough for beautiful sketches. I'm very tempted to purchase the larger set of these after years of just using a few shades. I drew just a little bit more that day, 2 different face angles from the same reference, capturing moments maybe half a second apart. This is so relaxing to do and really one of my favorite exercises lately. But also showed me that I'd love to study mouths and chins more, be it with the next part of that portrait drawing class or some anatomy studies in general, as they were what I struggled with here. Bouncing back and forth between these very different approaches in my sketchbook, the analytical and the expressive, feels like a good balance to have, and I'm excited for more sketching sessions as the year goes on. Let me know if you try any of these: the detailed breakdown for practicing, correcting sketches you mindlessly doodled or that are maybe a bit older, and then finally the moving references for a less perfectionist approach. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you have any sketchbook habits or exercises of your own that you enjoy and can recommend. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe leave me a like, and I'd love to hear how your sketchbooks are going. I hope to see you again in my next art video.